Welcome everyone to Inspire Employee Engagement with Purpose, an expert webinar for L&D professionals brought to you by getAbstract. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to give you some time to come in. I already see almost 70 people, which is awesome. Thanks for joining. My name is Ramona Macinetti, and my guests today are Steve Curtin, author of The Revelation Conversation, and Andrew Savikas, Chief Strategy Officer at getAbstract. Hi, Steve and Andrew.
Good morning.
Hello. Great to be here.
Or good evening, as the case may be.
Nearly every organization has a mission, vision, and purpose statement displayed on the website or framed and mounted in the executive corridor. Yet employees often struggle to articulate how their company's purpose relates to their daily job tasks. So in the next 40 minutes, we will talk about tools and best practices to inspire greater employee engagement by connecting job functions to company purpose. This webinar is a live session. If you have a question for Steve, please add it to the chat and we will try to address as many of your questions as possible. So let me start out with a question which comes up automatically. Steve, what brought you to write the book, The Revelation Conversation?
Well, you know, it's interesting. In 2016, I was invited to speak on the topic of connecting to purpose at work. And my client had flown in 222 top managers from around the country to an airport hotel in Chicago. And in the lead up to the presentation about connecting to purpose at work, I asked my client how many of the attendees would be fluent in the corporation's one-sentence corporate mission statement. He told me most. And so as we got closer to the event, I asked him, I said, I have this idea. Why don't we distribute index cards and let me just ask them to record on the index card prior to the presentation the one-sentence corporate mission statement, and then I'll just carry on from there. I did that, and we collected the cards. I carried on with my presentation. Then afterwards, it was interesting. I went through the 222 cards, and as it turns out, most did not know the one-sentence corporate mission statement. In fact, there were only 4 correct index cards. There were nearly 3 dozen that were either left blank or had a question mark. And at least one top-level manager thought it was a trick question, and he or she wrote on their card, I don't believe we have a corporate mission statement at this time. So that was really the dawning for me that, hey, this is interesting that most sophisticated organizations develop a corporate mission, vision, or purpose statement, but it's also true that most of their managers, most of their employees are completely unaware of what it is.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a great story, Steve. Now, for some people, their work really is a calling, a true vocation. While many others, and maybe even some of those filling out those index cards at the airport hotel, their job was just that, a job. But you've said that those kinds of jobs can still be truly purposeful. Can you say more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, when you're talking about a vocation and you're talking about a calling, oftentimes those are linked to vocations such as clergy or medicine or social work or working for a cause organization or working for a B Corp. The great majority of employees go to work and they work in a job and they fulfill a career and not necessarily a vocation, you know, a sacred calling. But their work can still be purposeful. And that's my point, is that, you know, every organization has a purpose. Whether or not they've articulated it, every organization has a purpose, because the literal definition of organizational purpose is why the organization exists. And it's the same for a job role. You can ask for every job role in the organization, why does this job role exist? And when you get to the answer to that question, you uncover the purpose of the job role, and so every job role can be purposeful.
Got it. Thank you. You know, there's something else that I spotted in your book, and I think we have a slide for it. There's a distinction that you make in a kind of a growth model that you've presented, where you separate personal development into horizontal and vertical paths. these sort of two journeys. Can you sort of walk us through the difference between and the importance of both of these axes of personal development? Because I think it was a really great model.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, from birth, really, we're on two journeys. And so the journey you see, the vertical journey there on the left, is a journey of self-discovery. And that's a very intimate, a very private journey. It's our existential journey in life into the meaning of oneself and one's being. It's inaccessible to others. It's very private. Unless we choose to share it, it's about personal fulfillment, as opposed to the horizontal journey of self-improvement, which rather than being an existential journey, it's an intellectual journey. Rather than being private and inaccessible to others, it's public and accessible to others. Our coworkers, many of them are on the same journey. Peers, mentors, supervisors can oversee the journey and can contribute to our development. So they're two different journeys. And the reason that I open the book with this distinction between the two journeys is that a number of organizations conflate them and they meld them. And there's this expectation that when your personal journey, your private purpose, your purpose in life is aligned with your purpose at work, the organizational journey, that somehow a job match nirvana. But the reality is that that is, it's absurd in most cases. I mean, my professional journey and my purpose at work, which is to inspire greater employee engagement by connecting job roles to purpose, has very little to do with my purpose in life.
Thank you, Steve. That is making me think. There has been some pushback lately regarding the notion that we should look for purpose, joy, and fulfillment in our jobs. I'm thinking here particularly about Sarah Jaffe and her book, Work Won't Love You Back. So the elevation of purpose above everything else can lead to burnout and justify also poor working conditions. That's what Jaffe claims. Where do you stand on this debate?
Well, on the debate, I think number one, that most employees are disconnected from purpose at work. And the reason that most employees are disconnected from purpose at work is that the management level above them is also disconnected from purpose at work. You know, recall my opening story. You know, less than 2% of the senior leaders in attendance could articulate the corporation's one-sentence corporate mission statement. And I'm not sure, you know, those who are participating in this webinar, maybe you can bring to mind, without the use of a smartphone or without looking it up, maybe you could bring to mind your organization's purpose. Maybe you're aware of your job purpose. Maybe you're fluent in your organization's core values, but I doubt it. And because of that disconnect, you know, Sarah Jaffe, and I haven't read the book, but I'm less jaded about the impact of purpose in the workplace, because I think for the most part, it's largely unknown and undiscovered. It's not that it hasn't been articulated. It's likely with a sophisticated organization, it's been articulated, it appears on the website, it appears on the screensaver, it appears in the employee handbook, it's enshrined in the executive corridor behind a pane of glass or on a plaque. So it exists. But at issue is that it hasn't been revealed, certainly to frontline non-management employees, aside from the onboarding or the orientation process. And because it hasn't been revealed, they're disconnected from it. It hasn't been connected to their daily work activities. It hasn't been leveraged to inspire greater employee engagement. And that's a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Thanks. While we are talking, I'm also spotting the chat, and there is a question which is asking about the differentiation between job function and job essence. So this is something you're talking about in the book also. What is the difference between a job function and a job essence?
Yeah, well, every job consists of two dimensions. Job functions and job essence, and it consists of three parts. Two of those parts are within the job function dimension of the job role, and then one of the parts is in the job essence dimension of the job role. And so, yeah, this slide, gives a nice visual. You can see job functions consist of job knowledge and job skills. And that's where most employees stop, because that's where most supervisors stop. In other words, if you possess adequate job knowledge and you can demonstrate sufficient job skills, then by extension, you are competent to execute assigned tasks, duties, job responsibilities. That's where most supervisors stop. When the employee, when the work group is competent, they can move on to a newly hired employee who's currently involved in on-the-job training in order to make him or her competent. But that's where they stop, typically. And so here, what we like to point out in the graphic is that there is a third part and a second dimension to every job role, which is job purpose, which is knowing why you do what you do, the way you do it, or how you do it at work.
Very well, thank you. So you're saying one's job purpose should also function as their North Star. There is an example you're actually giving in the book of an orthodontist whose purpose is not fixing crooked teeth, but rather creating beautiful smiles and building confidence among patients. So what advice do you have for someone to clarify their own purpose like that?
Yeah, well, the total quality movement in the 80s, led by Edwards Deming and Brian Joyner took part in that. Certainly later, management theorist Jim Collins brought this notion of asking why, typically 5 times. I don't get hung up on numbers. Whether you have to ask why 4 times or 7 times, you get at the root purpose, the root higher priority of the job role. And that the example that you referenced from the book is the orthodontist. Many orthodontists would say that their job role, why they do what they do, is to straighten patients' teeth. Well, that's really the veneer. You can ask some questions about why do we straighten teeth, and you get at for instance, to inspire confidence in the patients, because now they can smile. They can feel confident in their smile. They can be maybe more expressive or more outgoing. They can initiate interactions with others confidently. So there's really a root cause for every job role. Another example from the book, my background is with Marriott Hotels. And when you think about if some of the viewers have done some traveling, they've interfaced with a hotel housekeeper. If you were to imagine what their job role, if you were to ask them, why do you do what you do? Most housekeepers in most hotels would say to provide a clean guest room. And they'd be right from the standpoint that that's table stakes. You have to provide a clean guest room, or you're not competent to do what you do, okay? So they possess adequate job knowledge, they demonstrate sufficient job skills, they're competent, and they can provide a clean guest room. But again, that's very top level. You ask, why do we provide a clean guest room? Well, to satisfy guests. Well, why do we satisfy guests? Well, to inspire their recommendations. Well, why do we inspire their recommendations? Well, the intent to recommend question on our hotel satisfaction survey is correlated with guest loyalty. Okay, well, why do we want to have loyal guests? Well, loyal guests are responsible for 80 to 90% of the positive word of mouth about our hotel. They're less price sensitive, and they have higher return and repurchase rates. That's why we want to. Okay, so what's the true purpose of your job role? Is it to provide a guest room, a clean guest room? No, it's to create a loyal guest. And so you just have to keep asking better questions to get at the true purpose of the job role. And then think about it. How will that housekeeper behave differently if he or she knows that the higher purpose of their job role is not simply to provide a clean room, but to create a loyal guest of the hotel? Will they look beneath the bed, pay attention to detail, be observant, to remove any evidence of a previous guest? Will they check the alarm? How many times have you stayed in a hotel and then 5 a.m. the alarm goes off? You were planning to get up till 7. Will they deactivate the alarm from the previous guest? Will they report maintenance issues? Will they care? Will they leave a personalized note? They may do all these things knowing the higher priority of the job role is something other than simply high dusting, low dusting, tub and tile.
Yeah, absolutely. They feel responsible and also involved and engaged. Makes sense. Thanks.
That's the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are great examples of job, the orthodontist or the housekeeper that, at first glance seem pretty obvious what the purpose of the job is. But as you've articulated, there's really more to it than that. And certainly, I think if anyone wants a masterclass in the 5 whys, they should spend some time with a 4-year-old. I think that's a great way to experience that kind of probing questions. Something that I, certainly in reading your book that seems pretty closely tied with purpose is values. And you've emphasized the importance of complementing values with value statements to help employees tie values to actual behaviors. And that distinction between values and value statements, I found really helpful. And I was hoping you could provide some examples for the audience about really what you meant by that.
Yeah, most values, core values, appear as a set of core values, and many of them, I mean, you can imagine what they are. In fact, these may be core values of the companies, of some of the participants on this webinar, and those are values such as customer service. We value teamwork, we value honesty, we value integrity, we value equity or diversity. These are imitative core values. In some cases, they're performative core values that lack substance when they simply list as a value. In other words, you could print out core value lists from companies, and if you remove all the identifiers like company logos and so forth, and you put them side by side, most employees in most organizations couldn't tell their organization's core values from the core values of another organization. And so it becomes imperative that you not only identify what your core values are, and the slide you just had up was a slide from Pfizer, and that's a slide that appears in the book. And what they've done is they've not only listed their core values, but then they have provided value statements in terms of how Pfizer, how the organization interprets, here it is, how the organization interprets those values. So, for instance, equity, it says, we believe that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and cared for. That's how they interpret equity. And then they take it a step further and they say, well, this is how we behave around the value of equity. In other words, this is how we actuate the value of equity in our organization, in our day-to-day behavior and decision-making. So this happens when we are inclusive, when we act with integrity, and when we reduce healthcare disparities. And Pfizer is a really good example because oftentimes, as I said, values are just performative or imitative, and they just reside there to look good. And what Pfizer did, during the health crisis, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we were leaving 2020, entering 2021, and we had a vaccine, a first-to-market vaccine from Pfizer, they priced it at the cost of distribution to low-income countries in order to address the healthcare disparities and honor the value of equity.
Mm-hmm. Very good example. Thanks. Go ahead, Andrew. Was I interrupting you? Sorry. Okay.
No. I'm sorry. No, I was just saying I appreciated the example. I think the Pfizer one is a very timely one.
Mm-hmm. To give our audience some really hands-on advice, Steve, what exactly is a revelation conversation and how do you go about such a conversation, especially if you have never done that before?
Yeah, well, the revelation conversation is introduced for the first time. I mean, that's the title of the book. The cornerstone chapter of the book is chapter 4. So you really, you wade through the first 3 chapters, the first one being the 2 journeys that we discussed earlier, chapter 2 being this distinction between job function and job essence to reveal the totality of the job role. And then what we point out in chapter 2 is that every job role has its own unique purpose, as we've been talking about. So then chapter 3, the 4 questions, gets at, within those 4 questions, identifying what is the single highest priority of my job role, the supervisor, the manager, the leader who's reading the book, and then what is the single highest priority of the job role of my direct report, for the job role or job roles that I oversee. And maybe they're one and the same, but without contemplating those questions, you don't know. So you actually go through chapters 1, 2, and 3 in order to be prepared for chapter 4, which is to initiate the revelation conversation. And Ramona, to answer your question, the revelation conversation is simply a starter question that leads a spontaneous and organic conversation with a direct report. It's a one-on-one conversation, and it has really 3 objectives: to reveal the totality of the job role, to connect the employee's daily work activities to the higher purpose of the job role and organization, and then third, to inspire greater employee engagement. And the question is this: you would approach, you're girded, you're prepared, right? Because you've read through the book, and you're prepared to ask the question, would you describe for me, from your perspective, your job role, what your job entails? That's the question. And then you go silent. And then usually what they'll do is they'll say, well, let me see, describe my job role. And what they'll do is they'll give you a litany of job functions, okay? Essentially the bullet points in your job description. And I know this to be true because I've asked this question a lot in my consulting work. So they list job functions, and then I would say, as the manager, I wouldn't chastise them and say, everything you've listed is a job function. Don't you know about job essence? Don't you know about the higher purpose of your job role? Because of course they don't, because nobody's talking about that. What people are talking about are job functions. So that's what they're fluent in. That's what they're aware of. They're competent. They know what those are. But what you would say is, listen, everything you've listed is important because it's not zero sum. It's not job functions or job essence. It's not execution and delivery or purpose and contribution. It's both. And so you need to validate what they've said. And you say, listen, everything you said is important. It's vital to our success. It's vital to your job role. But if that's how you would describe the totality of your job role, then I, your supervisor, your manager, has explained your job role to you incompletely. And there's this whole other dimension of your job role, which is job essence. And that's your single highest priority at work. And then they'll say, what's job essence? And you'll say, well, it's your single highest priority at work. And then they'll say, well, what's that? And then because you've contemplated it, because you've thought about it, you'll say your single highest priority at work is whatever that may be. Create a promoter of the hotel, create a loyal guest, as in our earlier example. And then this leads to a productive conversation with the direct report about how exactly they go about doing that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Let me squish in, sorry, Andrew, let me quickly squish in a question from the audience who seems to be warming up. There's someone asking, how do you feel about Peter Drucker's thoughts about functional society and the employee bringing their individual purpose to work?
Yeah, well, I think that, I completely agree. If you have an individual purpose that is aligned with the purpose of your job role or the purpose of the organization, and that doesn't necessarily have to be at a cause organization or a B Corp like Bombas or Warby Parker. That could be, that could be in any business. It's a reference to the story about the mason who, when asked what he was doing when he was building a wall with bricks, is not just that he was laying bricks, but that he was building a cathedral for generations of families to worship in. Or the custodian at NASA, when he was approached by JFK, supposedly, this may just be a legend, and asked what he was doing as he was mopping the floor. His response was that he was sending a man to the moon because he was as much a part of the mission as a custodian at NASA as one of their engineers. So I truly believe that's individual because it's a very private matter. When you migrate your purpose in life to your purpose at work and create alignment through job crafting or through some other technique. But I totally believe in that, and I think that when you found that job, you're probably going to stay with that job, and you're probably going to be highly engaged.
Mm-hmm. Here's a comment on that, or something we said before. Someone writes, I find that for many employees, their purpose is to satisfy their direct supervisor. It's also very telling.
Yeah, so the purpose of the job role is to appease the boss?
That's what the person is commenting, I think, yes.
Yeah, I would say ask a few more why questions.
Hmm.
You know, Steve, you talked about the importance of that revelation conversation being spontaneous and, really, fairly informal. And, I think your examples illustrate how uncommon it is for people to have those kind of conversations that really clarify purpose and essence for the job. And I know certainly a lot of managers don't look forward to having important conversations that are impromptu and informal and unscripted. And so I would, love to hear from you, if, as you pointed out, this kind of conversation really doesn't work unless it's, adapted to the individual and feels to them like it's and is really about helping them on this journey. So absent, a script or, a real set of talking points, what could a manager who's doing this, for the first time or the second time, better prepare themselves to lead an effective revelation conversation?
Yeah, I would say just do it. It's like anything else. The first time you do it, there's going to be, perhaps a level of discomfort. So maybe when I selected the first candidate for a revelation conversation, I might do that. This doesn't mean that you couldn't rehearse with a spouse or a significant other or a roommate. You could, or a peer at work. You could. But if you felt comfortable approaching, process of elimination, you have, maybe more of a high trust relationship with one person than another 9, maybe approach that individual first. And you may even give them some background, that you attended a webinar, that you read a book, or that you read an abstract, and you gleaned insight into this conversation. And then you just ask the question. It's a simple question. Would you describe for me from your perspective? So there are no wrong answers. So it's very non-threatening. It's a very approachable question. Would you describe for me from your perspective your job role, what your job entails? They're going to list a set of job functions. That gives you an opportunity to say, if that's how you describe the totality of your job role, then I, assuming you're their supervisor, I've described your job to you incompletely. There's another dimension of your job role, apart from job functions, which is job essence. And they're going to say, what's job essence? You're going to say, what's your single highest priority at work? And they're going to say, what's that? Because they don't know. They know their job functions, but they won't know the answer to that question. They may say, if you were to ask them, and I've done this, I've asked, 5 people the same job role, what they do, and those lists are all very similar. But then I'll ask them why they do it. And again, individually, what's your top priority at work? And they'll say, wait, they think you want to hear, quality, customer service, safety, productivity, cost containment. These are all the things they're going to say. But I didn't ask for a litany of priorities at work. I asked for your single highest priority at work. And that's really up to the manager to determine in advance of that conversation and to reveal, articulate, make clear during the conversation. And then that leads to a ton of great conversation that's unscripted. Once I know what my single highest priority is, again, if I'm that housekeeper and I recognize my single highest priority is to create a loyal guest of the hotel, how do I go about doing that? And this is a very productive conversation. What can I do besides the technical aspects of my job to do that? How can I express genuine interest in the guest? How can I convey authentic enthusiasm for what it is that I do? How can I provide a pleasant surprise? And there are a myriad of other ways in which we can create a promoter of the hotel, a loyal guest of the hotel, as opposed to simply providing a clean room.
Mm-hmm. Steve, you've mentioned the manager quite a few times, but what do you see as the role of L&D in supporting revelation conversations and creating team alignment?
Yeah, the role of leadership and development. I came from a human resources, that's the umbrella, human resources organization, worked within training and development on both the development and the delivery side. And, you know, I'll tell you, human resources and everything that falls underneath it, oftentimes, you know, is focused on, you know, enforcement of a, you know, for instance, if you look at this as a training initiative, as enforcement of this training initiative, as opposed to enrollment and bringing people on board. And so, you know, I would say that they would really need to approach it. And this is a distinction, by the way, that I learned from a well-known author here in the United States named Seth Godin. He makes this distinction between enforcement and basically, you know, butts in seats and mandates, and enrollment, which is, or enlistment, which is getting buy-in in order to produce the outcomes that you'd like. And so, you know, to respond to your question on the human resources and the training and development side, I think the priority is to get buy-in from your customers, your internal customers, that we are better off as an organization with not only supervisors and the management levels above them being aware, in fact, being fluent in organizational purpose, in job purpose, in core values, not just imitative set of core values, but how we interpret them as an organization and how we apply them at work, to be aware of that and then to cascade that information to every employee in every role throughout the organization. That becomes the work of human resources and training and development from an enrollment standpoint, in terms of, you know, creating the training, delivering the training, and really serving as a champion for this effort.
Mhm. Thank you. And there is another kind of challenging question from the chat. How does one balance the requirements of the job that may not directly align to the higher purpose, but is critical to be successful in a job role?
Yeah, you know, let me think about that. Coming from a hospitality background, you know, at Marriott, you know, customer excellence is one of the values, and certainly a focus on customer service. There's another value that is aligned with innovation and change. And so I think in response to the question, I'd say that not every value will necessarily be a match for every individual. So if I'm working in hospitality, customer service, that's going to be likely, that's going to be a match. And I'm going to be, you know, thriving working in the world of hospitality. But that doesn't mean that I'll necessarily be seen as an early adopter or as an innovator or as someone who embraces change. Although that is a part of the core values of the organization, it may not resonate with me personally, but that's no reason that I can't be engaged and thrive in that work environment, even though there's a little bit of conflict there. Does that address your question, Ramona?
Well, it was the audience's question, but I think yes. So what kind of mission statements can be easily translated into job purpose statements then?
Well, there's some like Disney, you know, for instance, their higher purpose is to create happiness. Creating happiness applies regardless of job role. And so for instance, their custodians at the theme parks have been trained to focus on creating happiness as opposed to the technical aspects of their job. They need to do both, but the focus is on creating happiness so that when a guest of the park spills her popcorn, the custodian doesn't run over with his or her broom and dustpan and sweep up the popcorn, because that doesn't create happiness. What creates happiness is replacing the lost popcorn. So they'll immediately attend to the lost popcorn, they'll replace it. When the guest has the fresh popcorn in hand, then they will attend to the spill. And so that's the distinction. The higher priority of their job role is not necessarily a clean park, it's to create happiness.
Andrew,
But
I
they do
want to
both.
give you the chance for a final question or comment.
Yeah, I liked the there were sort of two aspects of KPIs you talked about in your book. You talked about how companies without a clear purpose often fall back on these, you know, sales numbers, profit percentages, these targets that really that people aren't really, that they don't really grab people's attention, and it really creates disengagement. On the other hand, there are other measurements. One of the examples you gave is the number of times that a worker introduces themselves by name to a customer, as something that not only is correlated to positive performance, but gets the employees engaged, increases engagement. So
Right.
what is, and how should someone in a leadership role think about the distinction between a good KPI that increases engagement versus a sort of bad KPI that decreases one?
Okay. Well, I'm inclined to say that all KPIs, if it's a key performance indicator that you feel is important, then I don't want to invalidate it. You just need to be careful about which KPIs you're using to inspire or motivate performance. Because if it's a KPI that, as an employee, I don't feel that I impact, in my performance is somehow attributed to it or attached to it, then that may be an ineffective KPI to use to inspire performance or motivate performance from that particular employee. The other danger with KPIs is to get caught up, as Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he used to write and talk about getting caught up in the thick of thin things. And what he meant by the thick of thin things is becoming embroiled in terms of our focus on transactions and activities, in other words, efficiencies, as opposed to relationships and results and effectiveness. And so when you're thinking about KPIs, think about KPIs that are more relational, if possible, certainly more results oriented than activities oriented, and certainly more effective than efficient. And I can give you an example. You mentioned the use of names. I worked with a large global retailer who had their own internal customer satisfaction metrics, their metrics that matter. And a couple of those are things like overall satisfaction, intent to recommend, share of basket, which is essentially spend, average spend. And they detected a correlation between the use of names and the deliberate encountering of an associate employee on the sales floor. And they were able to correlate when they asked the question of the customer, did you encounter an employee on the sales floor? And when they asked, who was that employee, and they could recall their name, they found a double-digit increase. It was actually 18% in both overall satisfaction and intent to recommend. And if they recalled the name of the individual, there was an increase in share of basket, increased in spend of 20. It was between 28 and 31%. It was 28%. And then if they had a delightful experience with the associate, the employee with whom they encountered, it was as high as 31% increase in spend. So those are KPIs, obviously, that the employees could impact, certainly metrics that matter, and certainly metrics that could demonstrate the correlation between encountering someone, being assertive in that way in a retail environment without hovering, using your name, wearing your name badge, all these things, and the correlation between those behaviors and those actions and the results in terms of increased spend, increased overall satisfaction, increased intent to recommend.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you both, Steve and Andrew, for all your valuable insights, and thanks to our audience and your great participation and very good questions. To read the free summary of the Revelation conversation, you can check out the link or scan the QR code, which we will see here in a second. And please pick up a copy of Steve's book also. You will receive the recording of the session within the next few days. And also Steve will follow up on the questions which we could not address today. I've seen there were some more coming in, but we want to respect our audience's time. So you may find more relevant content on promoting employee engagement and other L&D related challenges on getAbstract.com. So getAbstract stands for 23 years of Swiss expertise and quality. And we are the largest library of compressed knowledge with more than 25,000 texts and over 15,500 audio summaries. Our content is curated, expertly summarized, and accessible 24/7 at work and on the go. We work together with more than 800 international publishers, and we have a dedicated customer success team who's helped you to embed our solution into your system and to customize our learning solution. We also offer innovative learning tools, which are designed to help learners to apply the knowledge. So please hang on for our teaser video of our latest tool actionables. And then later on, head over to our corporate solutions page on our website to sign up for a free demo and to learn more about how it could benefit your organization. Thank you again, Steve and Andrew. It was great to have you here today.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much.
I guess that's all from now. Please stay tuned for upcoming events, and bye-bye. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.